My name is Willy Bolander. I study influence, persuasion, and leadership in selling and sales management, and I teach people how to sell. In this podcast, we'll talk to some of the world's top sales leaders and see what we can learn from them. Welcome to the Sales Lab. This episode is brought to you by Rainmakers. But here's the thing, it's not the word Rainmakers. It's the word Rainmakers with no vowels. RNMKRS, Rainmakers. How will artificial intelligence change the future of sales? Will it help us do more, replace us? Join Rainmakers virtual sales competition to see AI in action, helping thousands of students get massive role-play practice and feedback on a bias-free level playing field, and it's free. To join the movement, go to rainmakers.org. Again, that's RNMKRS, Rainmakers with no vowels.org. Hello, welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Marcus Smith from Boss Alliance Financial Group. Again, I don't have enough positive things to say about Marcus. Great guy, great insights. In this part of the discussion, we're going to talk about regulations, why he went into insurance, how it's somewhat of a recession-proof type of context to sell in, the difference between sexy products and other products like insurance. Actually, quite a bit about the Socratic method. We make fun of pharma. Now, I know some pharma guys are going to disagree, and maybe I'll get some emails saying, no, you gotta think about pharma. And to that, I would say, okay, well, come on and do an interview. Let's talk about pharma. Talk a little bit about agility, science, art, and persuasion that go into selling. And I think I'm going to title this one, 4 Years to Become the Number One Salesperson. We hear a little bit about Marcus's story and his path to becoming number one. Hope you get a lot out of it. Let's go back to your journey.
Okay.
You wrap up at Houston. Mm-hmm. You decide to, you're doing entrepreneurship as well, but you said you didn't have a lot of confidence in that idea. So you decide to go to work. And were you choosing between multiple options? Did you know that you wanted to go the insurance route? Tell us a little about that.
Insurance was my third option because being a student in the program for excellence in selling created a brand new dilemma that actually has just as much anxiety as me when I first graduated with little options. Having a lot of options was just as stressful as having little options because you still kind of feel the pressure of I'm getting ready to make a decision that can actually affect the whole path of my life, right? So no, insurance was not my first option. It was definitely my third option. My first option at first was commercial real estate, because in commercial real estate and when I was networking with the decision makers in the program, it was the only job that I felt that could match the income levels that I felt like I would have received if I was in the NFL.
Wow.
So that was always kind of like a goal of mine, is to try to get to that income level that I felt like I had the ability to achieve, but, life kind of just didn't work out for me that way. So that was one on my list, and I worked hard to really build those relationships. Then 2 was pharmaceuticals, more so pharmaceuticals because my dad was in pharmaceuticals for years, and he was great at it, and I loved his lifestyle. So with the pharmaceutical lifestyle, he was always at my games. He was able to travel with no problem. He was always home around 5:36. I only saw him do paperwork on the weekends, and he was able to come to my practices and different things. I loved the life that I saw modeled in front of me. So I was a believer in that industry from watching him go through it. And then I obviously shadowed different graduates from the program, and honestly, it didn't look hard at all. It looked so easy. I'm like, oh God, this is like, come on, this is a dream job. Like a couple of times I went out with a couple of reps that were former program students, and I was like, we are really on lunch for 2 hours. Is anybody gonna tell you to go to work? And it wasn't the case. Like, I know some of the program students actually was able to achieve master's degrees while they was on the clock. I'm like, so you was going to school, getting the master's, and able to hit your quotas in pharmaceuticals at the same time. And it was like, absolutely. So I love that freedom. The reason why I really got into insurance is because those other doors wasn't open yet for me. And when I first, but I started to like the ideal of insurance when I, was open to networking with other opportunities. And when I first interviewed with the particular company that I ended up working for, they sold me on a lot of different stuff that was beautiful. A $40,000 base before I sell a thing was good. I was like, that's my base? Like, your
Yeah.
base is 40. The average person at that time made six figures there, and all of my counterparts that I graduated with, for lack of better words, I destroyed them in the program. So it's like there's no reason why I shouldn't do it here, right? And then the more I was in the industry, the more I began to fall in love with it, because my finance mind, because I also have a finance degree, started to kick in, and I started looking at some things that made the future of it more secure. Like the fact that for the most part, insurance is highly regulated, especially in Texas, to where by state law, you have to carry auto insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with home insurance, it's also regulated to a degree, because if you have a home, you have to have insurance, or you won't be in compliance with your mortgage, and they're going to force place insurance on you, which then makes that a high demand commodity as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as I began to be in the industry and I would go through different economies, good and bad, I would see my friends that I graduated with that chose pharmaceuticals or chose commercial. And when economy was bad, obviously businesses are not growing. So if they're not growing, they're not getting lead spaces. So that means your lead pool is lower. That means your income is lower. I looked at pharmaceuticals as I was in insurance for a while, and I started noticing it was a big push towards generics and generic drugs. So generic drugs hurt the pipeline of pharmaceutical, which hurt the incentives for their salespeople. So from a security standpoint, it was more so luck that I got into insurance, and then developed the wisdom to be able to see that it was actually a great business, right? And so it was more so definitely not my first choice, but it was something that at least I came in with the work ethic to give it a hard shot. And when I did, it ended up being just as rewarding as any of the other opportunities, and actually more. I made way more than I know that most pharmaceutical agents would make. And actually, most of my friends that are in personalized insurance are very well off. Like even one of my guys that I graduated from the program with, he's you know, doing very well, a millionaire. And he was told when he was with the first insurance company that I was working with that he would never make it. But now I look at him, and and we still are friends to this day. And he has, three Maseratis, $1 million home, had $100,000 pool built from scratch that he paid for cash, all from insurance.
Wow.
So, and even going through the hard economy like we're going through now, because I've been through the 2008 mortgage crisis and all of that, I knew I would be okay because of the regulations of insurance. I knew I would be okay. It's like everything is going to suffer, but people have to have their auto insurance. And if you're a homeowner, you have to have your homeowner's insurance. Now, the other
Absolutely.
luxury life insurance products, you really still have to have the skills to solicit and close, like life insurance and annuities and that type of stuff, because you still have to find a qualified prospect. But in terms of my business now, it's super turnkey. And I would even say, for the most part, one of the few businesses that I would call almost recession proof.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just be honest, it was more luck, right? Because I didn't want it when I got it, but I worked hard and it ended up working out for me.
Absolutely. Well, that when I was coming up, the hottest job you could find were these pharma jobs, and of course, because of regulation that has not been favorable to it, a lot of those jobs, a lot of people are jumping out of those jobs and trying to go more into medical devices and things like that, where they don't have to keep as many notes as they have to in pharmaceutical. Just as you pointed out, I mean, it was my observation very early on, talking to a buddy of mine who introduced me to some other pharma guys who, and this was many years ago, so the numbers would be, I'm sure, different today, but, saying, yeah, I work 3-4 days a week and everything's fun. I take people out to dinner and I'm making $70,000 a year and I still have free time to do whatever I want, I said, okay, I mean, 70,000 was nothing to scoff at the time. But then I'd go and meet some insurance guys and realize, okay, well, some of these guys are pulling in not 70, not 100, but like 300 and 400 and $500,000. And they worked really exceptionally hard for the first 5 to 10 years, but some of them were basically not working any longer. They just had a business underneath them that was taking care of things, and they had so many renewals. And it was really sort of staggering how, okay, pharmaceuticals has positioned itself as this very professional, very sort of sexy opportunity. And yet the people that I knew that were making really big money were selling insurance, which I guess has the exact opposite reputation, right? It's kind of dry and boring and sometimes hard to understand and hard to communicate. Which I understand, but it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, if you can get comfortable with that and get good at selling that type of a product, then the rewards are yours,
Right. And I would also say one of the most important things that I learned, I wouldn't even say was sales from the program. I think the most important thing that I learned that I put together that really kind of really helped me more than anything was more so leadership and how to train. So the theory that I learned in the program, I teach people that work under me. And I paid close attention to the techniques that y'all use to get us to get it. I used to talk to Dr. Jones a lot and Professor Webb a lot. And one of the things that they used to always do to us was a Socrates method. And they used to teach. We use the Socrates method of teaching. And I said, what is that? But then when they told me, I noticed, I said, oh God, y'all do this all the time. But it's what made them get it. The Socrates method of teaching was by questions.
Yep.
And so they ask a lot of questions, and I notice when I train, I do that a lot because questions make people lock in. Because if you just teaching, anybody's going to just tune out. And you might be giving them a detail that's exponentially important. But when you stop one of your teaching moments and then use the Socratean method of teaching through questions, then that makes sure that they're getting the details of it. So because at a certain point, like you said, pharmaceuticals was maxing out around 70,000 to 100,000, but those insurance guys and ladies that make the 500,000, 300,000, $500,000, that's able to put their practices on autopilot. You can't do that without teaching. You can't do that without duplicating yourself. So to me, even in sales, I really, 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 really take very serious everything that I was taught in the program that can be summarized in the acronym ASAP. Because we was taught that, and I still read about that to this day about ASAP, which was selling with agility, science, art, and persuasion. So those 4 things is what I pretty much still to this day build whatever venture I'm doing around, right? What are the procedures and scientific things that work that you need to do day in and day out to have success? That's the science. The art was obviously the creativity that goes into sales, but that can vary from person to person. The agility, to me, was more so also can vary from business to business, but it's also a mixture of science, especially adapting to the different personality types.
Yeah.
I was having a meeting with somebody who was training me, right? And they said, Marcus, on that particular call, you seem like you was not into it, like you didn't care at all. But what they didn't know, Willie, is that I was trained to adapt and have agility with analyticals.
Mm.
Because you know this, people that's listening might not know this, so I explain a little bit. We was trained on 4 personality types in the program for excellence in selling. Excellence in selling. Drivers, expressives, analyticals, and amiables, right?
Absolutely.
And the analyticals, they are the people where they are low in responsiveness and also low in assertiveness, right?
Yep.
So very dry. Very they hate confrontation and they hate pressure and salespeople. So their language is nonchalant, almost as if you don't care, low pressure style of selling.
Yep.
And when people watch me do it, they'll say, "Man, you didn't care about that at all." I say, "Trust me, that person did." You know, that
Absolutely.
person loved it. Like when I'm talking to an analytical or engineer type, and I'm talking to them about proposals and insurance, even if you saving them thousands, the worst thing to ever do, you know this, Willie, but I'm also talking to people that's going to listen to this podcast.
For sure.
Oh yeah, so we're saving you 1,000. I'm going to go ahead and send over the applications because it's a no-brainer. As much as you would think that would be common sense for them to take it, it could actually kill your sale.
Yep. Yeah,
Because
for
it's
sure.
the style that they hate. So even if I'm saving thousands, I say, well, Mr. Analytical, we're saving you about $2,000. This is something that looks like a really good deal to me, but I'm not going to rush you. I'm gonna send this over to you and let you and your wife discuss it. And then if something that looks good to you, maybe give me a call Monday or Tuesday, and I'll see what I can do to stop what I'm doing. If you call and if you still feel good about it, we'll process it. But no pressure. Also keep in mind that this rate could expire within the next week. I don't want you to feel as if I'm putting any pressure on you. I just want to make you aware because I know you hate surprises and I do too. So just check your email maybe sometime today and we'll get around to it when we get around to it. Now, if you heard me sell like that, most people say that had absolutely no urgency in it, but that's the agility that we've been taught in the program. So it's so many different skill sets in insurance and that I had to really bring out other than just sales, right? To really become the, I would say, mythological salesperson that you could be, to where when I begin to train, and I'm almost done when I say this, when I begin to train others to do what I do, I didn't just train them sales. Sales was just one part. I had to train them sales, but then I would train them the Secretarian method because you're going to have to train your people if you're going to be successful. Then I would train them on how to lead. So I would take them through Maxwell principles. And then what a lot of people don't spend any time on, but that's just as exponentially important in your sales career, is politics and how to function in corporate politics. Because you can have all the skills in the world, but if you don't have executives, managers, and people that believe in you, then your internal sales ideas are going to fall flat,
Yeah.
right? So, and how do you deal with people, even as a black man, to where you might run up against racism and all kind of thing in a political environment? How do you overcome it? How do you do it as a white guy that might go into an environment to where it's all blacks, but you still have to navigate through that political environment, right?
Absolutely.
So it's so many different skill sets that have to come together also in insurance that I was also taught in the program, not just the sales. It was the sales, it was the leadership, it was the management, and it was the Secretarian method.
Absolutely. So you decide to go with insurance. You show up on the first day. What happens between day one and whatever point in time you become the number one sales rep in the entire country?
To become the number one sales rep in the entire company took me 4 years to do, because at that time, the guy that was number one in the country was number one in the country for 30 years straight. So
So he had some momentum going.
He had momentum. He had the benefit of obviously corporate favoritism. He had the resources. I was the guy that was a newbie coming in with ambition to take him out.
Sure.
So when I walked in, it was more so of a mentality that I'm getting ready to just bust my butt to be the best. And more so because one of my mentors in the program that was a jacket sponsor, Alex Fernandez, I love him to this day. He's a mentor to this day. When I was, going into the program and seeking, jacket sponsorships with that for the program was to how to get mentors. He took me to his office and he told me something that just stood out to me. He took me to his office and he showed me every company he works for. And he said, Marcus, there's not been one company that I have not been one or two in the nation. He said, don't you ever go work for anybody without showing them that your value is exponential. Mm. And he said, you will have tremendous security if you do that. Okay. And that just stood out to me, So when I went into that corporate company, I had that as a mentality that just making money wasn't good enough. Being the best in the regional wasn't good enough. It was be the best in the country, be the best that this company has ever seen, and continue to just fine tune your craft until you get there. And that's what I did. So it some things that I learned, I had to actually go relearn. Like I would literally go spend time with professors at the program to just kind of go through sales theory. And when they would invite me out to be a guest speaker, I wouldn't sit there cocky like, okay, I'm the man, right? Let me impart to these young kids. I never had that mentality, Willie. I would go in there, and if the professors was teaching, I would sit there like I was a student all over again in case it was something that I didn't get the first time when I went through the program. And so often I would see something, a new light that I didn't see, just because I would do my best to walk in and humble myself and listen as a student again, even though I was a very accomplished sales professional. So it was just a process. And I would say this, that's super important. And I teach this to anybody that I'm training on how to be a leader. The worst thing to ever do is to give up on yourself and give up on people that you hired. Because when you do that, what happens to your brain, in my opinion, is you stop being creative and your mind stops creating ways to overcome whatever objection that's in front of you, because you've already just succumbed to the thought that this is what it's going to be, what it is.
It's some sort of permanent thing. Yeah.
Exactly. It becomes permanent. So whenever I hire anybody, I always hire them. And if they fail, I feel as if I fail, right? And as long as I'm thinking like that, I'm always trying to create different ways to get them going or get them to get what they might not be getting yet, So, and that's what built so much of my Socraterian methods, different ways that I teach certain things, is because I was always trying to find different ways to get people that I knew I needed to bring up to get them there. So, and even when I accomplished that, a lot of executives would call me and they would say, Marcus, like, I've been here for 35 years. I thought I was going to retire and this guy was going to still be number one. He was like, that's crazy what you accomplished. And
in 4 years, I mean, that is not a lot of time.
No. And what I left behind when I left that company was a culture of people that was like me, where I trained because a lot of my people that I trained, I trained 3 national rookie of the years and 8 regional rookie of the years, and multiple people that became very good salespeople and contributors to society exponentially, because they had the mentality I had, because I passed it down. to where you can accomplish it, but you're going to have to think outside the box. You're going to have to be willing to do what others are not willing to do. And sometimes if you don't get it this year, you don't quit. You got to come back at it next year, and you just have to develop a grit. And if you develop that grit, some people say it in this weird way, but I'm going to say it like them. When you really just push at something, it's amazing how things that's also begin to come to you because you're really giving your all at whatever you believe in, you know? So, and that's what I was doing. And that's what I'm continuing to do to try to be, you know, successful in this short life that I have, you know? So, you know, to accomplish that was exponentially well, but I have way more goals and way more things that I'm going to accomplish. And I want to be one of the people that maybe people might look back and say he didn't accomplish, but I want to give him my all in his life to where people say, you know what, that was one of the guys that really had vision and a dream, and he went after it. And I want to be one of those examples to a lot of people that the American dream is very much alive and strong if you're willing to work hard, believe in yourself. Obviously, you're going to need luck, but more so make your own luck as much as possible and just keep grinding it out. And most importantly, also stay humble as much as possible to where when somebody's coaching you, really listen, because a lot of my best practices and tips came from me humbling myself to other people.
Mm. Yeah, that's pretty huge. You know, I mean, I guess as a professor, my existence is predicated on the idea that there's a lot of questions that we don't have answers to. And I kind of like to think that, you know, if you're a professor without questions, if you're a professor with answers, you've missed the boat, you know? So there's always more that you don't know. There's always something that you need to figure out. You know, if your spin questions are working well, maybe you also need to consider when some of the tactics described in the challenger cell come into play, right? That, maybe there's something to learn from all these different methods, all these different avenues. Marcus, I'm looking at the time, and I know we've been on the call for a little while. I've got about 50 more things I would love to ask you, but I do want to be respectful of your time.
Okay.
Would it be possible to pick up, part 2 of this conversation sometime?
Yeah, absolutely, Willie. I'm more than happy to do it, to impart whatever you want to do. You family to me. And I felt honored that when we discussed doing this podcast, you know, I love giving back, mainly because I was giving, a lot of people gave back to me, and you know, and that's so honest. I wouldn't have had even close to the success that I've achieved without spending the time, or people spending the time to help me. So anything that's going to help you and help listeners maybe believe, dream, and accomplish, I'm all for it.
That's it for this interview. I hope you got something valuable out of it. Of course, if you did, be sure to subscribe and rate this podcast on whatever app you use to listen. Also, share this with your colleagues and friends, and let's continue to have a deeper discussion on all things related to selling and sales leadership. See you next time in the Sales Lab.